It's Monday, 19th of April, 2021. In today's special EPG show, we are joined by Dean Smith from the Rochdale AFC.com podcast, who's joining us this evening to discuss the massive game between the two sides at Spotland tomorrow. And we're also going to be discussing and ranting about the ESL. I'm John Aspinall, and this is Seasiders Podcast, episode 175. Not So Super League. Welcome everybody back to the Seasiders Podcast. We're on an EPG, EGP even tonight. Tim, an extraordinary general podcast. We're also previewing Rochdale with Dean, so I'll just introduce Dean first. Hi Dean, how's it going? Thanks for joining us.
No, thanks for having me, John. Yeah, not too bad. It's a bit of a crazy day, but not too bad other than that.
Okay, cheers. Welcome, Tim.
Welcome, evening, everybody.
All right. Matt's joined us as well. Matt, we can call you Matt rather than Mitch this evening because there's no Matt Smith. And we've also got our accredited sports journalist, Mr. Sean McKinley.
This guy.
I know he hates me saying that, so I'm just keeping on saying it. So welcome, Sean.
Cheers. I feel like I've been called up from the reserves, so I'll put in a quick 5-minute shift.
Well, there's plenty to talk about this evening anyway, so we're going to come to, just before we go, kick-off proceedings, just a bit of sad news just to start with a tribute to Chris Peachy. So Chris was he was a lifelong Seasider, and in 2018, aged 35, Chris was sadly diagnosed with stage 3 cancer. Let's just get his picture up, get our ugly mugs off. Here we go. Get me in the background. There you go. So major surgery in November 2018 followed, and Chris fought courageously, battling 6 months of daily chemo. But in April 2010, following further tests, the cancer had reappeared. Further surgery in December 2020 removed Chris's voice box, his pharynx, and his larynx. The operation was a success, though, allowing Chris to spend Christmas at home with his family. However, further post-operative complications in 2021 led to the cancer being discovered yet again, and Chris was given just months to live. Sadly, 12:30 a.m. on Friday, the 16th of April, Chris lost his battle to cancer, and instead he will watch his beloved Seasiders gain promotion from the comfort of a cloud in the sky. So, rest in peace, Chris, from us all on the Seasiders podcast. Blackpool fans everywhere, and we'll just have a few seconds just to remember Chris in this sad time. And also, if you just have a quick look at the banner, there is a just giving crowdfunder been set up by his friend Jordan, who's his best friend. So if you can donate just a couple of pounds, whatever you can afford, to help his young family in this quite sad and tragic time. Okay, so that was Chris. Let's move on to the Rochdale preview. Kind of puts everything into perspective, that though, doesn't it?
It certainly does, and to lose for his family, you just got to feel for them to lose the father, the husband, and obviously for his parents as well, no doubt. What a very, very sad time, and I think the best we can do is just maybe dedicate the show to him, and it's one thing that's great about Spotland Football Club is the way that everybody pulls together, and there's already been a fairly significant amount of fundraising go on, and it's fantastic to see that, albeit set against such a tragic backdrop.
It certainly is. The tower is being lit up it's got his name on it as well, apparently, tonight. So I think that'll just be going on now. So if anyone's going past the tower, go and say hello to Chris at the tower. Right, let's go on with the show then. Our Rochdale preview. So let's get the graphics up. A bit unprepared. Rochdale preview. Okay, so Dean. So they're normally slicker than this. Hit me a bit of that.
It throws you off,
Dean,
doesn't it? It throws you off, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. It's just horrible, those sort of things. Dean, so tell us a bit about yourself, how you got involved in your podcast, and a bit about your podcast. How long have you supported the Dale for, etc.?
So I've been a Dale fan for about 22, 23 years now. The website has been going for similar sort of time to that, to be honest. It's been going for a long time before I was involved. It was the only real place growing up supporting Dale where you could find news that wasn't through the official website. And then about 2 years ago, I'd always been using the forum, the message board, what have you. And I'd posted a few blogs on there. And then a couple of years ago, Cole, who used to run the site, passed it into mine and Chaff's hands. We tried to carry on the good work he'd done beforehand with kind of previews and match reports and blogs and what have you. And then we started the podcast at the start of lockdown. So it's been about a year now. We've had some great guests on, including BBM, the manager, and some ex-Premier League players like Adam LaFondra. So, yeah, we've just really enjoyed doing it. And although it's not been a great first season to be doing it, I think just being able to chat to some of my mates about Dale has really helped me through what's been a pretty difficult time in terms of, not being able to go to the game with them. So, we really enjoy doing it. We just hope that at some point soon we'll be able to do it in more celebratory circumstances than the current season have been.
I think we've all mentioned, Dean, that it's kind of kept us sane having our pod and just having this connection with people. Because in these times we're just so disconnected from the football, and it's kind of been a bit of godsend to him, hasn't it? It's just kept everyone together.
It's given, to be honest, it's given. I think not us as presenters, and I think the patrons and the other people who listen or watching. It gives a bit of structure to the day because you're so used to going to the pub and meeting your mates and having a drink and maybe having a couple of pints after the game, and all that's been taken away from us. So you have your 90 minutes in front of the box, and it's a bit soulless at the best of times. I think doing a pre-match. This is what we don't normally do a Tuesday night one, Dean, if you didn't know. But we normally do one on a Friday night, and then we come on a Saturday night straight after the game and do the stuff that we would normally do in the pub and just rant and, eulogise over a great goal and, have a go at whoever's not had a great game. And that's what it's all about. That's what football's about. And it's been a lifeline for everybody, I think, from the point of view of just keeping that connection as good as it can be.
Yeah. So Dean, tell us about Rochdale's season so far in a few sentences. Obviously, we've beaten you 2-1. Well, it was in February, but not been the best, I guess.
No, it's been a long season. I think we all kind of expected to struggle at the start of the season because financially we're always kind of up against it in this league with the fan base that we have. But that said, the players we've got, we could have certainly performed better than we have. We've had a lot of injuries, like every club has. But I think the issues have been so obvious throughout the season and haven't been corrected. And I think that actually the Blackpool game at Bloomfield Road was actually a perfect example of it because I don't think Blackpool played particularly well that night.
No.
What they had was that clinical edge and a little bit more experience, and were a bit too wise for us. And I think that's been the case throughout the majority of the season in a lot of the games we've played, to be honest.
Okay, so we beat you at was it 1-0 at Bloomfield Road?
1-0.
So I think if you speak to any of the guys here, I think we were reasonably impressed with Rochdale, weren't we? You're definitely not the worst team that we've seen this season. Sean, you're nodding your head. They were a reasonable, decent side, weren't they?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what's been a lot on a lot of people's minds in terms of Rochdale, in terms of the style of play and stuff. But I think ultimately it's all right us saying that as we're neutral to what's going on in Rochdale season, but you can keep playing expansive, attractive football as much as you like. But if we were getting conceding the goals at the rate that Rochdale are doing at the moment, we wouldn't be saying the same thing. So it's all right us saying it, watching them once every often. If you're watching them week in, week out, it's probably a different story. I think there's a lot of parallels with us in terms of our start to the season. I think we were quite naive and we wanted to just play that expansive style of play, regardless of the opposition and regardless of how we're playing. I think Neil Critchley obviously cottoned onto that and compromised, and I don't think Barry Murphy is compromised this season. I think that's ultimately where the issue lies. If you're not willing to compromise and understand that you've sometimes not got the players at your disposal to win those sort of games, doing your best to be structured well at the back and not concede is important. I don't think they've done that, and that's obviously why or where they are.
Matt, were you impressed with Rochdale when we saw them?
Yeah, they weren't bad. From what I remember of the game, we were fairly in control, and it was the game that Marvin got injured, wasn't it? And then Marvin went off, and we just fell to pieces. And they had us pretty much on the rack. But I think, like Sean says, my impression of Rochdale is the word I thought summed us up at the beginning of the year was flimsy. We looked quite attractive, but we looked a bit flimsy. And the little bit I've seen of Rochdale, aside from the game against us, I've thought, I don't know if that's fair, Dean. I thought you just look a bit flimsy, like you're just not. You're there to be got at. You know, heads go down, and I don't know if that's fair or not.
I'd say it's completely fair, to be honest. I think both of you have kind of hit the nail on the head there, and. Again, it's frustrating because, like you say, you've only seen little bits of us this season. We've seen it all along, and still it's not been corrected. We got to the final last couple of games, and we've finally seen kind of a little bit of a switch in mentality, and we've picked up 2 wins. And it makes it all the more frustrating because you just think, well, why didn't we revert to this 2-3 months ago? I mean, in particular, we were saying on our podcast in November, we were saying we have 3 or 4 really good centre backs. Why don't we try playing 3 at the back? We finally switched to it last month, and results have improved. And it's not a coincidence. It just seems that you're both hit the nail on the head there. I think BBM is very stubborn in the way that he wants to play football, and although it is kind of an attractive style of football, it's not always the most effective. And I think you need to be a little bit more pragmatic at times if you want to stay in this league, particularly when you've not got the finances that some of the other clubs have got. But like I say, I think on paper, I think our squad is good enough to have done better. So, we can't really hide behind the finances or the injuries. I think BBM has to take a huge part of the blame for the way this season's gone, to be honest.
You mentioned the word pragmatic, and I think that was something we weren't, Tim, were we, at the start of the season? We were playing this rigid 4-3-3, playing triangles in our own half, and we just weren't going anywhere with it. And we changed to a 4-4-2 to be more pragmatic in this season, and it kind of worked in it. So it was good that we changed him early on in the season. Yeah,
but I think it was almost like, and we were very frustrated at the beginning of the season. I mean, we bear no relation to the team that we are now, and I almost felt like the management needed to have the heads banged against a brick wall because we were like preaching on here about. I mean, none of us are massive fans of 4-4-2, but it was the only way we ever got a result, and we only got a result when it was forced on us to play 2 up front. And every time we did, we scored goals, and yet then we'd go back to playing the way we were before. And we were on here, weren't we, doing the old the old Mike Bassett, weren't we? 4-4-2, and just get some points on the board, because we were indeed we were at the bottom after about 7 or 8 games. We were anchored there, and we were worried about going down, not going up. And the transformation since we've got the spine sorted has been quite remarkable. I mean, we are the best team in the league over the last 30 games, 25 games, 20 games, whichever one you want to do, apart from 40 odd, because of the first 7 or 8 games, which were dreadful. Yeah.
So Tim mentions there, Dean, that we're obviously with the form, or one of the form sides at the moment in the division. I was just looking back at your records. Now you're coming into a bit of form yourself. You've won two on the spin at home, and I've also seen a statistic that you'd not won for 6 months at home before you beat Swindon at home 2-1 on the Tuesday, and then it was when Accrington, wasn't it? You beat.
Yeah.
So you've won 2 back-to-back, so it's like waiting for a bus, isn't it?
Yeah,
like 6 months for one, and then 2 turn up.
Yeah, pretty much.
So how have you played in these 2 games, and do you think you're going to carry that form into the Blackpool game?
Well, obviously, it's going to be a much tougher test given the form that you guys are in.
Although we only drew 0-0 with Aki, and you beat him 3-1.
Yeah, I was surprised by that as well, because I thought Aki on Saturday looked like a team that didn't have anything to play for, which is really like the last thing you expect from Accrington with John Coleman in charge, especially when he used to manage us, and there's always a little bit of needle there. He always seems to want to try and get one over on us.
I forgot he was at your man, yeah. He was at yours
yeah, so I was surprised by them on Saturday. I didn't think they offered much. I thought it was probably our best home performance of the season. But like you said there, 6 months without a home win, there's not a lot of competition for that. So against Swindon are awful. Swindon are probably the worst team I've seen us play in League One in the 7 years we've been here. They were horrendous. And wow. I think if we hadn't won that game, then it just would have been. It would have been. There's no way BBM could have stayed, to be honest with you. That's how bad they were. And then Accrington was an improvement. But again, they didn't show a lot. Whereas obviously you guys are in great form. So I think this game comes at the worst possible time for us, because I think if we don't get the 3 points, it might be game over. Whereas the 3 or 4 games we've got after it are probably, well, they're certainly more winnable than Blackpool. They're definitely, games that we can look at and think, if we need the points, they're probably the kind of teams we want to be playing. I think it's Crewe, who are struggling for form and don't have much to play for. Doncaster, who've fallen off a bit of a cliff since Darren Moore left. So, yeah, it's kind of, I kind of wish maybe that Blackpool was the last game, and then we could maybe give ourselves a chance going into that last game. Whereas
the problem, sorry, mate. The problem is you've got Wigan and Wimbledon occupying 19th and 20th with. They're both hitting form, aren't they? They both won 3 on the bounce, and they're 5 points? You're 5 points behind Wigan, but with the game in hand, so you could have done with them not picking up that form, I think. So, yeah, exactly. Unfortunately, they're hitting the form at the right time, aren't they?
Yeah, we've got Wimbledon next Tuesday as well. So I think, again, it feels like we're kind of just trying to keep within touching distance at the minute. It feels like we kind of just want to keep ourselves alive for as long as possible. If we can go into that Wimbledon game knowing that a win might turn the situation around, then obviously that's got to be the aim at the minute. But again, I can't really see, unless we put in one of our better performances, I can't really see us getting the 3 points on Tuesday.
Okay, so how? Go on, Tim. Let's see. You're going to say.
I was just going to say, I was just obviously looking down your list of players. Obviously, the player that stands out that we know a little bit about is Jimmy Ryan. Has he played at all? I mean, he was always injured when he was with us.
Yeah, he's been injured all season, pretty much.
That's a surprise.
Was he called Glassback or something? That was his nickname.
Oh, I think he played. When he played, he was a great player. But
he was, yeah. Yeah, I liked him.
I don't know why, but it looks like on your website, on Rochdale's website, unless it's not Wiki, is it? I think it's got Jimmy Ryan. It looks like he's got his Blackpool top on. It does.
That's possible. He hasn't taken for us.
It's in black and white, but everybody's got different kit on anyway, and he looks like he's got his Blackpool kit on, which I thought was a bit bizarre. Anyway,
so Jimmy Ryan's not a danger man then, anyway, Dean. So he'll probably be hopping in on crutches. So Matthew Lundy, top scorer with 12 goals. Will he be playing, and is he your main threat that we need to be looking out for?
Well, he's another one who's been injured for quite a while. He came back. I think he played the last 3 or 4 minutes on Saturday, so he's back available. How fit he is, I'm not sure. I can't see him starting. He's been our best player this season. He's a bit of a legend as well. He's been with us before. It's his second spell with us, and in both spells, he's just been like all commitment, all action in midfield, wins the ball, gets forward. He's been arriving late into the box, like you said, this season, and scoring goals as well. So if he plays, he'll be a major threat. And then again, I don't like hiding behind the injuries, because I think it gives BVM and the club a bit of an easy excuse. But another one of our danger men would be Stephen Humphreys, and he's been injured for maybe 2 months again now. He scored 10, I think, in 22, 23, something like that. So he's another one of our key players who we've missed for a big part of the season. So they would normally be the danger men. Without them, I mean, even Quadro Bar, who Manchester City nearly signed in January, in the end they didn't, possibly due to
That's a great name. What was that name again?
Quadro Bar, yeah.
Quadro Bar. That's a name,
yeah.
Isn't it?
He's exciting, but he's not in great form, so I don't even think he'll get a start. So, yeah.
So Matt, we tend to struggle against teams that don't come out and play against us, don't we? So You told Dean about what sort of a Rochdale we want playing against us tomorrow.
Yeah, well, essentially, we want you to come and try and get 3 points. You know, we want you to attack. We really, really struggle. I mean, we struggled against Aki because they essentially played 4-6-0. They just packed the midfield. They the strikers were coming back. What we want, a team that comes on as we're really, really good again on the break in any way. We're really, really good. Give us space. We're good, but try and nullify us, and we can be nullified. We don't lose very often, but we can draw. But I'm optimistic in a sense because a point's not really good for you, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I think we're going to have to come out, so that might play right into your hands, to be honest.
So, Dean, would you expect Rochdale to do that tomorrow, or would you expect them just to try and play for a draw, given the fact that you need to win, really?
I mean, I can't see us trying to play for a draw because, like you say, we need the 3 points. But I think what we will try and do is try and keep it as tight as possible and maybe try and nick a goal from a set piece or something like that. We don't really have, without Lund, without Barr playing well, without Humphreys, we don't really have the players to kind of get the ball up the pitch and keep it there. It might end up going a little bit more long to Beasley, who's like a bit of a target man, who's actually scored a few goals as well recently. So maybe it'll be a case of trying to get the ball wide and getting the ball into him and trying to nick a goal that way rather than, being gung-ho, because I think that will, I think we'll quickly unravel if that's the case.
It's going to be an interesting game nonetheless. So, yeah,
And we don't have a great record at Spotland. Let's get it right, do we?
No. I don't think I've ever seen us win there. Ever.
My first game there was in 1984, I think. about 84. And we took a load there. Every time Blackpool ever took more than about 500 away, we lost. So I think we had about 3,000 at Spotland and we got beat. I think it was 2-0 if I remember rightly. It was. I honestly don't think I've ever seen us win there either.
There was that game a couple of years ago and it was boiling hot. Anyone remembers that? It was roasting, and we kind of dominated for the entire game, and we only had one shot on goal all game. Nearly scored
last year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that was last year. It was the first. Well, it was the first sort of big, apart from the Aki game. It was the first big away game after the homecoming, and it was a beautiful day. But we just did nothing.
And we never do. Right, so let's just before you go, Dean, let's just go around the room and get our match predictions in tomorrow. So, Tim, how do you think this is going to go? Tim's always noted for being pessimistic,
and I'm going to stick with that pessimism. I think again, there is a bit of I keep saying this is a bit of reverse psychology because I think if I predict to win, then it could be a problem. I'm going to go for 0-0. I don't think they're going to score, but I think we're good. I think it's just typical. But somebody said in the comments, didn't they? Yeah, typical Blackpool. We beat Sunderland and then we'll draw the next game.
Matt, over to you.
Yeah, despite the fact that typical Blackpool, but I'm going to go for 3-1 to us. But I think we'll concede first, and I think we'll concede first. We'll all have a massive tantrum about how it's going, and then we'll put it right and knock 3 in. And Sims is going to score twice. That's precision.
Sean, obviously good at predicting things. So what's your prediction for tomorrow?
I'm going to go for a simple 2-0, I think. I think we're just a class above, really, which is, I don't really say that lightly these days, given my record. But yeah, I think it'll probably be a step too far for Rochdale. I don't really rate Swindon or Accrington at the moment, so I think they're kind of not too much to take from those. So yeah, 2-0.
I'm gonna go for 2-1. I think we're gonna be 2-0 up, and we're gonna concede with 15 minutes to go, and it's gonna be really edgy, like it always is. So, Dean, are you gonna buck the trend here with your boys?
I don't think I've predicted a Dale win all season, so I'm not going to start doing it now. I think you'll just be slightly too strong for us. I'm going to agree with you and say 2-1 to Blackpool.
Oh, get in. That means it's going to be. No, that means we're going to get beat anyway. Right. Thanks ever so much, Dean, for coming on. Do you want to just tell everybody about your Twitter handle and your website just before you go? If anyone wants to follow you.
Yeah, of course. It's rochdaleafc.com and Twitter is @rochdaleafc.com. Like I say, it's the standard kind of stuff, really. podcasts and previews and what have you, and we try and have a little bit of banter with some other League One clubs occasionally. Probably going to be League Two clubs next season. Well,
fingers crossed, and all the best for the season, apart from tomorrow, obviously.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me, and please do send across the link for Chris's Just Given as well, because I'm sure some Dale fans will be more than.
All right, yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's actually in the show notes for the YouTube page. So if you're watching this on YouTube, it's in there, so you can click it on there. So thanks a lot, Dean. All the best, mate.
All right, thanks, guys.
Cheers, Dean.
Cheers, Dean. That was Dean Smith there from the Rochdale pod. Right, Wes. Sorry, mate, you've been sat there patiently waiting
I've
to
been
come
sat
on.
here patiently, don't you worry.
I said 20 past, did I? So I was very conscious
Don't you worry, it's an
about
interesting listen. Don't you worry, it's an interesting listen.
Excellent. Right. So, Wes, you just want to introduce yourself to the people on the pod.
So I'm currently just working on a footballing brand that's working on visuals and data analysis, and mostly in the top European clubs and across the Premier League, and are working to be able to build that brand have done for the past year now, and still working on that to get it to the top sides of data analysis work.
You're the type of guy we want for this next segment.
Can I say, Wes, thank you. I know it's the lights, but thank you for wearing a tangerine shirt for the match.
It is.
I thought it was a Liverpool top that was just the light was making it look like.
I am a Liverpool fan, but I decided to go a little bit closer to tangerine just for this pod.
Yeah,
fantastic. That'll do.
Professional. I thought it was a BST Pro. I thought it was a BST protest shirt, Tim. It looked a bit like one of them, didn't it?
Yeah, it does. It's the same Adidas top, isn't it?
Yeah. So Wes, obviously, he's a Liverpool fan. So the hot topic on this EGP Extraordinary General podcast is the topic that's on everyone's lips at the moment, which is the European Super League, which was ridiculously announced yesterday. So we're going to be all ranting and raving about that, and so let's just have a bit of an introduction to what the Super League is for those who don't know. So it's a 20-team league with 12 founder members. 3 are expected to join additionally to make it the 15. But apparently they've refused. PSG, Bayern, and is it Borussia Dortmund?
Yeah, Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah. So the other 5 will be determined by a qualifying mechanism annually based on achievements in the prior seasons. Would anyone like to speculate as to what the hell that means?
Could mean anything at this rate.
Yeah, I don't think they know, do they?
Annually based on achievements in the prior season.
I'm going to say Porto rejected as well, didn't they? So, I mean, they've obviously been reaching out to some of the further leagues, like you think in Benfica's, PSG aren't in it, which I'm really surprised at.
No Dutch teams either. You'd expect Ajax and Feyenoord to be possibly mentioned.
Well, there's always been the talk about the Atlantic League, which has been like Holland, Scotland, and Belgium, and that's been like always in the background for about a decade now. So I potentially that is then going to, if this happens, it's like a catalyst effect across the other sort of major European nations.
Okay. Right, so this is how it works. It's going to be 20 teams split into 2 groups of 10. We'll play each other home and away. Top 3 in each league qualify for the knockout stages. 4th and 5th enter a playoff. There's a 2-legged knockout matches with the same format as the Champions League, much as like the Champions League, I guess. And it says, as part of what the ESL are calling a dramatic 4-week end to the season. And it's that dramatic, Tim, that there's no relegation, much like Phil Gart's side wanted to implement in this 2-tiered Premier League back in the day.
I think part of the problem here, I was watching Sky Sports News before, and they had the UEFA president on, and there was the banner going across, and apparently one of the board members of this new ESL, which we've got to get used to pronouncing, was saying that some of these owners, particularly these American owners, cannot get their head around the concept of relegation. And that's clearly driving this. Do you remember when the Venkies bought Blackburn? They didn't think you could get relegated out of the Premier League either, did they? So it's clearly this American franchise, just money-driven concept, isn't it? And And it was interesting. I listened to Rio Ferdinand, who called it a war against football. And he was saying, like, what part of the interest is all about the relegation fight as well, isn't it? It's the promotion and relegation fight is as interesting as who's actually going to win the league, Well,
it keeps your season interest, doesn't it? If you're just mid-table.
Yeah, I mean, there's just going to be. I mean, I think they gave an example. Tottenham go to wherever away in Italy, say towards the end of the season, and they're the 16th in the league or whatever. What possible interest is there in that game for anybody? It's just nonsense, isn't it? It's just really, it's just.
Well, just to follow up on that, Tim. As much as you guys keep saying that it's the ESL, the actual branding name is the Super League. So the actual aspect of where you can see this going, and of course we know that the aspect of money in football has corrupted it from the last 15 years, and no one's surprised on the aspect of businessmen being at the top of it to run their clubs like a business and using the assets within them businesses, players, staff, the actual marketing of the club to create what I think they've done. It is not clever marketing, because I think I could have came up with a better name than the Super League myself. But the aspect of it is going to be worldwide. So what is stopping, just because there isn't a European, what's stopping this being Al Hilal or into Miami in the next few years, but not even being in their own host stadiums? We've seen Tyson Fury versus AJ proposed for Arab. We saw AJ fight in Saudi Arabia. So what's stopping us seeing Manchester United versus Inter Milan, or Manchester United versus Al Hilal, or Liverpool versus City in the Asian market, in Australia or elsewhere? And I mean, coming from a Liverpool fan's perspective, I mean, we the whole deal for Takumi Minamino is an ironic factor is we've only ever started him in midday games, and that it was early kickoffs essentially. And that is because it's easier for the Asian market to be able to view him. And the £7.25 million release clause was essentially a gateway into the Asian market. So it's never going to be. It's reading between the lines of everything that they're doing here. As much as the ESL is easy to be able to say, this Super League is going to be worldwide before we know it.
Wes, I'm just going to jump. Sorry, Matt, 2 seconds. You come in just after this. I'm just going to jump to this because it's pertinent to what you've just said there, Wes. So Dan Rohn sent this tweet out today. According to a source, some of those involved in the ESL called traditional supporters of clubs legacy fans, while they're more focused on the fans of the future who want superstar names. So, and I noticed this guy in the reply, I don't know him, Andy Jolly, he put, it's the untapped Asian markets they're interested in. Who cares about a share of 50 million, a share of a 50 million English fan base when there's 2 billion Asians waiting to pay a stream for a game and buy a shirt, and those teams can guarantee 1/15 of the pot. Now, that absolutely nailed it for me, and it just mirrors what you just said, was.
Yeah, I mean, going on to that is just like many people across even the English game now, even focusing on the Premier League just as a small factor. I mean, there is an aspect of it being one set of billionaires and another set of billionaires, and you're picking one of the two between Premier League, UEFA, or the European Super League. I mean, I'm not justifying one's doing a good job, one's not. One's doing one a lot worse, but we won't go. We will carry on with that in a second. But in regards to this, it's taking everything away from the aspects of people don't realize that it's not just the English market who watch it. It is a worldwide stream franchise, and that's why the TV revenue is so lucrative, because we always forget that it's America, for example, watch all of our games, and we live here and we can't even watch them. So never mind the aspect of it being European clubs where we have to pay BT at this moment for European Champions League, but for our own domestic league as well, because without COVID, of course, we wouldn't be watching any of our 3:00 kickoffs.
It was interesting, Wes. I was watching, I went on Liverpool's Twitter feed when they put the announcement out, and it's full of people all around the world, from living in Zimbabwe and China and Japan, I've got very, very interesting views on where this is going, but they all pronounce themselves to be, number one Liverpool fans on their handles and everything, and none of them have ever been to the game, and they're all saying, well, this is great news for us, and this is going to make Liverpool a lot bigger club and everything, but it's got no relevance to us as English fans, has it? What somebody in Zimbabwe thinks about the way our game should be run, it's frightening.
Well, in regards to that, I mean, as you say, their term of legacy fans is only taking into consideration people who actually natively go to the games. And going back, say, the last 15 years, for example, and the progression of football across that time, it's the club's mentality has been able to be trying to get from people from around the other parts of the country, other parts of the world to that game. Now what they're doing is distributing it out to them. So instead of it being the complete opposite way, you're taking the consideration of the English fans away. Now, in reference, let's go back to the reference of even Blackpool themselves, who've taken the club back from horrific owners and now you're happy with the project. I'm not saying that there hasn't been money invested there. It's been well invested, but that money that you've invested there has gone to other clubs down the leagues to keep staff, players, clubs alive and keep livelihoods in like still together. And if that's what they're trying to do here, that just takes everything away from how we enjoy football and the soul of what it is, the integrity. It's gone. For the announcement of it and it being okay for everyone else outside the domestic leagues or even the domestic fans themselves, the integrity is gone just with the announcement, never mind of them going forward with it.
Yep. Matt, we were having a joke, weren't we, about the timing of the announcement, which was officially announced at 11:20 to midnight last night. As if no one had noticed because they're doing it late in the day and everyone's gone to bed.
Yeah, we were all supposed to just wake up and realise we've got a World Super League now, but we hadn't noticed. I just wanted to pick up on what Wes said earlier about the World Super League, and I think it's very naive to believe. It's very, almost Eurocentric of us to believe that three American businesses, a Russian business, and City at the Abu Dhabi Group are in this for England, Spain, and Italy alone, and I think that's. I sort of half follow baseball. I have done for years, and I quite like baseball. And baseball, is like most American sports, has always had a tradition of franchises. If you go right back into the history of baseball to the late 1800s, they were kicking teams out because they weren't popular enough. And I think, to some extent, be careful what you sow. Some of these, be careful, where you go in some of these teams who've joined in. Three teams from London in a world, what could be a World Super League. That's an imbalance. What's going to happen to the least popular London team in there? What happens if we maybe start to think about that maybe the Hotspurs brand might work better in another country? Because that's how it works in America. And that's where the balance of power lies in this league. The LA Dodgers have won the World Series for about the last 3 years, but they used to be the Brooklyn Dodgers. They moved. They took the Dodgers name. That's how it works there. And as I think Tim said before, these people do not understand English sport. Or European sport. They are trying to apply the American model. And the Hotspurs brand, the Tottenham brand even, is useful. But as you said before, does that, it might not just be taking Tottenham on tour. It might be Mumbai Hotspurs in 15 years' time, 10 years' time, 5 years' time. Because the way those American leagues work is if you are not pulling your weight financially, or if you are not providing market value, you're out. That's how it works. The rest of the league say, sorry, we've decided another team would be more profitable than you from another city somewhere. And I think that, that's that.
As much as you say that they understand American sports, that in my aspect, all they see is American business. It's and yes, we're seeing the majority as businesses. And the reason why there is no relegation or promotion in this is because businessmen see business as the relegation and promotion aspects of it as uncertainty. And in business, uncertainty is not good for profit, of course. that's taking risks. And if you're able to make sure that your assets are keeping their value, eliminating the uncertainty, and that's the only way they're going to be thinking of it, to only keep their businesses' assets at the peak and to be able to make sure that the finances stay there with them at all times.
And that's essentially what I'm saying, is that the way that certainly the MLB and the NFL operate is the overall the leagues are closed shops. They always have been, and the overall value of those leagues is, Montreal had a baseball team till 3 years ago, and now they don't, because they weren't pulling the weight, because they weren't bringing in the TV figures. We've all laughed at Tottenham going, what are they doing there? But actually, in all seriousness, what are they doing there? Because that could be a pretty existential threat to Tottenham in the long run if they turn out to be the third London franchise that that don't do as well. What happens to them? That I think that's something
My only theory of them actually being there is just because of their relation to the American sports industry, using that stadium for the American football aspect. They're the only people that have got to the Champions League final outside of Liverpool and other ones there. So it's just more of, I would say, as long as we say them as the top six, which I hate the term, but it's because they're most relevant and related to that model. And I swear, if Daniel Levy heard that, he'd be all over it like a rash.
What concerns me here as well is, which was tucked away in the announcements, is that they've already issued proceedings in 2 jurisdictions. And I think we can guess one of them is a commercial court in London. Hopefully they get Marcus Smith. They are effectively taking preventative action to stop UEFA and the EPL from banning them and applying sanctions. And the bit that these are big business people, aren't they? And I think there's a calculation here, and they've actually, I think that the concern I've got is they've got the law probably on the side, in that there's been some case law. There was a Munich lawyer, a sports lawyer speaking, and there's been some case law, most certainly involving ice hockey. And I think the other one, I'm off the top of my head, was golf, where the existing organisations tried to ban new competitions, and it ended up in the European courts, and they very much came down on the ability of teams within the structure to create a new competition without running the risk of being banned from the existing competition structure. So that's a huge concern. But it was interesting to hear what Oliver Dowden was saying when he spoke in Parliament earlier, because he made it very clear that they were standing right behind the EPL and UEFA. And if they couldn't actually apply sanctions, then the government were thinking about stepping in and legislating on it. Now,
we've been asking for this for years, haven't we?
Yeah, but it could, and I think there's going to be a real proper standoff here, and I think there's going to be an attempt to exclude them, and it's going to be fought out in the courts. And unfortunately, I'm not a sports lawyer who could make multi-millions out of representing one of the sides. But
my only worry. Oh, sorry, go on.
It's going to be fascinating to see how it plays out. We're playing for the soul of football, aren't we? That's what's being played out here.
I think with the whole banning them, I think potentially there'll probably be an issue when it comes to banning them from the current seasons going forward. You think of obviously already underway, but I think the minute he's talking about sporting integrity and bringing distribute to the game, and that's a reason in itself to ban them under their own regulation. I mean, we've seen teams in the past be banned for things like that, and you think of realistically, you're looking at how it would even work in a domestic league. What are you going to put, like 12th place into the Champions League if you've got the top 6 still in the Premier League the season after, and you give awarding out Champions League places? How's it all going to work on that front? It's only going to work in a way that UEFA would then have to find a completely different way of starting qualifying into their own competitions. And I mean, you're looking at avenues to either stop this from happening. I don't think it should be stopped from happening. As far as I'm concerned, it can happen, and it'll be that defining moment for football, I think, where it'll finally come to a head. Sometimes you need it to go completely far south for it then to come back round. We look at our own situation with our owners and how it literally had to go to the very dire ends for it to then come full circle. And I think ultimately you're probably waiting for that is the best way to go forward. But you're looking at avenues for it to be stopped potentially. I think the banning from international tournaments of players is the key, really, for me. I think even if a player, obviously we all think the players are in it, a lot of people think they're in it for money and things, but ultimately they're not going to want to give up international tournaments, World Cups, Euros. These are the defining moments for players, and you think of players that will be available in those tournaments, but they're not able to play for the national teams. I just can't see them agreeing to that at all.
It would be it's a really positive spin on this, because I was actually looking through it earlier today, and try and build your England starting 11 from the clubs that are outside that. It's quite funny, because you're looking at Pope, Cresswell, Mings, Keane, Cash, Rice, James Ward-Prowse possibly, Maddison,
Yates.
And Sancho.
Jerry Yates up front.
Jerry Yates up front will do. DCL can still sit on the bench. And it's very funny to be able to look at it, because it's still not half a bad team. But just going back to your relation in regards to them sanctions coming in, we've seen UEFA go to court previously against someone that would literally detail that he would sue them on purpose just to go forward, because he had more financial gain in City's owners, and to be able to make UEFA, in all fairness, look absolutely stupid. And if we're looking at a band of people who have collectively come together to create a Super League who includes the Manchester City owner, then I don't think that many situations where this comes out where UEFA or Premier League come on top here, because we all know, unfortunately, in these kind of situations, money does talk, and they definitely have all of it here.
Do you know what they'll have done already? Because they've done all this behind the scenes, and UEFA have known nothing about it. They'll have got all the best sports lawyers in the world on retainer, all of them. So they're all conflicted. None of them can represent the existing leagues. I'm not saying that they won't have access to a reasonable standard representation, but you can guarantee all the best lawyers will already be on retainers, 100%.
That UEFA president called the Juventus chairman a snake. Don't
mince his words, does he?
That criticism from UEFA has been quite strong and quite vehement. But if you're looking at FIFA, I would argue that their criticism in the past day or so has been a lot less than it has been the months prior, when it was starting to come about that this could be a possibility. And I'm wondering if they already have kind of wilted in a sense. I think that if you look at the people that are running UEFA, they're slightly better than they have been throughout the history of the game, really, compared to FIFA. Have still very much got the same old heads that they've had throughout all of the scandals. And I think perhaps FIFA are probably going to fall by the wayside, and it's going to be up to UEFA to be the ones that are sort of standing against this. But again, it's as you were saying, like, they've got all the sporting lawyers on retainer, as well. I saw an interesting point that all the super agents like Jorge Mendes and the like have all sort of banded together in favour of this European Super League, and they're well on board with it as well. And if they've got the player power as well, then that's an important factor, because if they're controlling their players and ultimately they're persuading their players that this is a good idea, that's what will make the difference. It'll come down to the player, really, I think.
Yeah.
Let's just quickly speak about the players then. I kind of feel, much as it pains me to say, I feel sorry for someone that earns £100,000 a week. I kind of feel sorry for them, because they're in the middle of all this, aren't they? And they're going to be the visible targets for fans to vent at, because the owners have just chucked a hand grenade into a room and walked off, and just left the managers and the players to deal with it.
Well, we've seen almost this exact situation in cricket, though, haven't we? Because in cricket in the last 10 years, we've had all the franchise cricket, IPL and so on. And at first, people said, the players won't go. They won't give up playing test cricket. And now what happens, and don't be cricket fans, but what happens every summer, half the England team are off playing here, there and everywhere, turning up, 10 minutes before a test match because they've been in India up until the last minute. And certainly, it's not completely analogous in cricket, because the players weren't as well rewarded as they are in football already. But it hasn't been that many players have turned their back on franchise cricket, or I think some, Sean, you said that players might turned down the chance not to play. In the 50s, I was listening to something today. It was saying in the 50s, there was a couple of English players who were in and around the England squad who went to play in a league in Colombia. And one of them was one of the England centre-backs, and he lost his place in the World Cup in 1950, I think, the America World Cup, or 1954, whichever one it was. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know that the players are going to be our saviour in this, because...
Do you think Kenny will come out? Do you think any managers will come out, or do you think a player will come out and speak out? Does anyone think that's going to happen?
I just think it's PR-wise for players these days. You think of the social media influence and how important that is in terms of their branding, and players are becoming more like brands these days, especially the top players. And you're thinking PR-wise that the majority of their fans are going to be against it or for it. But the more you think about it, like we were mentioning before, the majority the people that are interacting with these players is people from the Asian markets, people from the American markets, and these are the people that take an interest in that side of things. And the more you actually think into it, then potentially, we always like to think that players hold things in high regard, but I mean, we're lower league fans generally, and that's kind of more of a real prospect and a real possibility, because they're not in this stratosphere of they're not even real human beings because they're in the Premier League and they're earning all this money. We see it on that day-to-day basis, but I think when it comes to the top stars, they'll sign up. But I think it's that middle ground of player. You're thinking of like your Declan Rices, you're thinking of like your Harry Winkses and these type of players, all these players that make up these teams. Are they going to be the ones? That's why I'm thinking the top players will probably go with it, but it's these middle ground players that are kind of on the precipice of both. Where are they going to sort of lie? Because it's very easy to go one way or the other, and they're going to have to make that decision.
It does depend on complete personal interest. I think, I don't know. As I say, majority of top football now, of course, because there is that elitist difference between the fan and the player. I mean, it does come down even lower leagues sometimes, but I mean, you can still see Jerry Yates walking about Blackpool, probably with a pint in his hand by the looks of it. But I mean, when it comes to the elitists, there's such a gap that it is cold. And I just feel like we are going to see what some players, and yes, whether they're ran by certain agents or not, whether their interests lie solely on the aspects of money, because they will be paid more in the Super League because wages will be astronomical. I assume that there'll be more lucrative contracts, much like the speculative one around Neymar and his hotels every time he scores, etc. But they will be more common in them aspects, or it's going to be down to the players who desire to play for their country, desire to play for their club in aspects. And if they're a local boy, for example, then I don't think they would ever move to that, because they're homebound. They know what it means. And any football player who goes to a game or has been to a game or supported that club in the stadium would be against that. And I don't see in any way, shape or form otherwise.
Okay, Chris, let's just...
sorry, go on.
Sorry,
I was just going to say with the point about the local players and stuff, I'm thinking of players that we've had that affinity with in recent times. I'm thinking of Kieran Tierney, like boyhood club, everything was great. He's this saviour of the club. The minute that a top offer comes up with a bit of money, then he's gone. And I think if you offer Jack Grealish a $400,000 a week contract to go and play in the Super League, 9 times out of 10 he's probably going to take it, regardless of his affinity for Aston Villa. And I think when we think about it, actually thinking about specific cases, that's when you start to realise that ultimately they're probably all going to go the way of playing in it.
I personally think that verges on what a player degrees as success, because if I was to go to a club that is going to a challenge for the Champions League or to be at the top of the Premier League, for example, then yeah, $400,000 a week because I at least have ambition. Here, you don't even have an ambition. You're not even going to win anything. So I don't think the aspect of what you would say as local fans and have that difference to change. I mean, with Kieran Tierney as your example, he moved to a club within the Premier League with a chance. I know a weak chance. Arsenal fans don't crucify me here, but it's a weak chance to get into the top leagues and maintain his place at another club because he did everything he could at Celtic. Whereas the aspects of Jack Grealish going to a club with no ambition for $400,000 a week, I would 100%. I would personally think that he would take his affiliation with Aston Villa and become a club legend there. But that's my personal view.
Okay. But are we over?
Just one sec, Matt. I just want to address this. So, Wes, I don't know if you know about this, but as Blackpool fans, we had this campaign called "Not a Penny More" campaign, where we starved the club of funds, and we didn't go to any home games for a good 4 years, and bar 600 or 700 selfish bastards, that stadium was empty for home games for nigh on 4 years, and it made a big statement. I heard Gary Neville on Monday Night Football saying that everyone needs to now mobilise against this proposed Super League, and what can we do as fans to stop this from happening? Now, Chris has put on there the fans need to boycott if it actually comes to happening and starve them of income. I don't think having an empty stadium would affect them financially, so that wouldn't count. But having an empty stadium it'll make it less of a spectacle. And we've all seen what football is like without fans in. Correct. So can you ever see that happening? Can you see United or Liverpool? Can you see their fans mobilising and creating picket lines, I guess, at stadiums, stopping people from going in? For me, that's the only way this could be stopped, via fan power.
I can agree the fact that fan power could be a point, but I don't think it matters, unfortunately, at this
stage. Even if it was an empty stadium.
Even in an empty stadium, because there has been a statement that has come out from one of the board members of the Super League to say that financial gain and revenue causes is their first priority, and for obtaining good PR, etc., which a good stadium would, or a full stadium would be good PR, is a secondary aspect. Jeez. So they have made it very clear that at least they're not hiding it. To be fair to them, let's give them that. At least they're not hiding the fact that they're doing it for financial gain and doing it for themselves. They have made it very clear the fact that financial power is everything. That's the case. And unfortunately, yes, you say empty stadiums may not be good for the English market and everything else like that. But in the grand scheme of things, we are a small island, and their aim is way bigger than us.
And listen, they've had 12 months of empty stadiums, and it's not affected the revenue streams for the real big boys, is it? If anything, the TV's been prepared to pay more, and so we are. The biggest concern in all this is this reference to legacy fans that you touched on before, John. That just shows complete contempt for everything that we like about football and what makes it the game that we all are so passionate about. Legacy fans, that basically means is you're in the past, we don't give a stuff about you, and that's the Liverpool owners saying that, that's the Man United owners saying that. It's classic American speak, isn't it? And it's absolutely disgraceful. It's
disgraceful throughout. I mean, Liverpool fans have gone to the ground today and put banners out there, so it's starting already. It just needs to make sure that snowball does not stop rolling. But even if it does even if it does carry on, the grand scheme of things is unfortunate. I just don't think that the fan power will be enough to push them that far. I mean, the one massive turning point, well, not turning point, I suppose, but one notable aspect of that statement that was released by every club is the fact on Manchester City's and Liverpool's statements out going about the Super League, not one was from their actual owner admitting anything to do with the aspect. Who was quoted on there? The vice chairman, which was Joel Glazer, which was an opposite fans football owner, which is not only a disgrace to the fans, who we understand what the club is actually aspect for, but you're going against your own integrity as a club and what you've built. And a lot of Liverpool fans would like to basically say we've been brainwashed with the aspect of you'll never walk alone is part with the fans. You've destroyed that with one statement coming out of it, unfortunately.
I mean, if this doesn't get stopped, us as Blackpool fans in this room, I can see a way out of it, because that's the top six just gone. We reset football and we start again. But for fans of Liverpool, of United, and the other four, you've got real problems.
Well, that's what I was going to... Sorry.
Matt, you go then, Sean.
That's what I was going to say before, was that, to me, in a self-interested way, I'm kind of with Sean, as he said at the beginning, let it happen. Don't really give a shit. So what Jack Grealish goes, there's plenty more people want to play football in the world. I've never really bought into this. Oh, isn't the Premier League wonderful business? You know, I sort of fell in love with football in the mid late 80s, and I love football despite the fact that it didn't have all these global stars. I love football despite the fact you didn't have all the shite that you got from Sky when it started with the dancing people and fireworks and all that. I just like football, and I'm not really that arsed. There's only 12, 15 teams. They can only have so many players. And in fact, for everything other than the fact that the actual fans of these clubs, it's disgraceful. You know, I watched not that long ago. I watched an advert on Liverpool's YouTube. It was cringeworthy, and it's shots of the terraced houses round. I can't remember what the suburb's called, but whatever it's round. A CGI Joe Fagan in a cafe talking to a CGI Ian Rush about Scouse values or something, and that's what they were putting out there. And it's disgusting. I don't give a shit personally if it happens from my point of view, selfishly, because football will live on and it'll still be decent. I'll still be able to go and watch it. But the fans of United, Arsenal, etc., who are actually supporting those clubs, it's a strange role reversal where we're thinking about how we could, how those supporters' experiences could be saved. It's a very surreal shift in roles, isn't it?
It could be good for the English game generally, because I think we'd do it'd be a reset. But I think Roy Keane always famously said about United. He said, "You get United fans when they're going away." I'm not a United lover by any stretch of it. He says they're the best, they're the proper United fans, and the proper people. Liverpool. A lot of people in Liverpool aren't rich. A lot of Manx aren't rich. City, that's a very deprived area, and you can't just brush these people away because it's history. And for us getting to the Premier League, amazing as that was, I was saying to my sister at Wembley, I was going, "Do you realise if we don't concede a goal in 10 minutes, we'll be going to Old Trafford, we'll be going to Anfield, and that's the dream, isn't it, for a lower league fan like us to go to these stadiums? So that's going to be taken away as well."
Yeah, I think we were talking about I think Matt touched on it there, and it's this capitalisation on the fan culture, and whenever they want to, whenever they fancy it, they'll capitalise on that fan culture. The only club that actually capitalises on fan culture but then lives by those words is probably Borussia Dortmund at the top level in terms of actually standing by their values that they actually represented. But you look at like Liverpool and Man United, and they'll boot the arse out of the branding that the fans give, and they'll make it their whole persona and culture around this club. As you were saying, look at the deprived areas around, and look at the ultimately grassroots levels of where these clubs have come from the very beginning, and they'll capitalise on it completely, and they'll brand it. They'll use it for their brand to build it up. And then the minute that it actually comes to a point where they can then shoot off and go the other way, they'll throw it to the side as if it doesn't ever matter. And that's what really infuriates me with football generally. Even without this Super League, that happens throughout the game now. And I think, obviously, we're talking about Sky being vocal about this. I mean, Sky will sell their arse in like a year's time to the Super League as well. I mean, ultimately, when we're looking at it, it's like Gary Neville is saying boycott it and stuff. Well, Gary Neville will be out of job then in a year because he'll be the one that's doing the analysis on those games if he wants to stay with Sky Sports. So,
don't worry, Sean. I think he's made enough.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, and ultimately as well, Gary Neville can talk about all this sort of stuff, but he's literally taken on an absolute non-entity in Salford, changed the entire brand of the club, basically bankrolled the club through the National League completely against the integrity of what that's about, and now they're sat in League Two. So I mean, I don't want to go at like Gary Neville's being vocal, but ultimately he's a hypocrite when it comes to the way that he runs football clubs and the way that he wants to operate when his personal interests are there. And I think that's the point. The personal interest always comes first, and the head of Sky Sports will suddenly change his tune when the money comes calling, and everyone else will do the same. And that's why I don't listen to much that anyone has to say, and that's why I'm firmly of the view that go off and do it, because I could not give a shit I've never given a shit about the Premier League for about a year and a half now, probably 2 years, even more potentially, because they're just dead rubber games. The only time I see the Premier League now is when I go to report on Burnley, and you look at where we're going with it. I could not care less, because it's that reboot. I just think it needs the structure needs the reboot, and this is the ultimate stupidity that finally turns people's backs on top-level football in the world, then so be it. If this is what has to happen, so be it, because ultimately the vast majority of clubs in this game are going to benefit out of this.
Well, just going back to that and them using the brand values, I mean, at this point, how much they've used that to be able to get it to a point to be able to get these clubs to the top level and to be able to achieve the fans coming to the games, etc. I mean, in your Manchester Uniteds and your Liverpools, etc. I mean, we know that the list for season tickets onwards, but I'd like to say, obviously, going to the games in specific areas of the ground. Obviously, with Bloomfield Road, it's not the case. You're there, you with other Blackpool lads, lasses, mums, dads, wherever. But there's specific areas of every ground in the top six now where it's people that you'll never ever see in that area. They're doing it as a Liverpool trip out or a Manchester United trip out, and the branding to the local people is not actually to the local people, though, is it? It emphasised the fact that they're looking like they care about their club and they're being empathetic. They're not doing it for the aspect. Why do they need to brand? Why do they need to market to players, people that are already going to go? There's literally no aspect of it. Well, it's like marketing when you stood there with a chocolate bar in your hand to a child going and putting an advert out and you've put it in its hand. It doesn't need it. Doesn't need the advert anymore. It's got the chocolate bar. It's the same aspect for them at all. It's just to make sure that the empathetic look of the club brings in the interest of others. And that's the only reason. And we've now got to the point where, as you've rightly said, every single one of you, they've swooped that aside for complete and utter financial gain for the aspect of world and not the communities anywhere around.
It's interesting because when the news first broke, you're thinking, obviously the six clubs, they're looking after themselves and it's what impact it can have on the rest of us. But actually when you break it down, it's the fans of those six clubs that are gonna really feel the heat in this, aren't they? And I took the Latvian director, last time he was over, I took him to the Liverpool game and we just bought some tickets off one of these sites, which is obviously a local lad who's got a couple of season tickets who gives the tickets out, and obviously makes a few quid out of it. But the stand we're in was just full. I couldn't believe how many non-Liverpool fans were in the stand. It was absolutely, I mean, obviously you could say, well, I was there as a non-Liverpool fan as well, but it was absolutely incredible. I mean, they weren't local people, any of them.
There was that famous video from that Liverpool fan, wasn't there? That lad, when it was a few years ago now. He said the game's gone, and
from
they were interviewing him outside. Yeah, that was it. And he really nailed it home, didn't he? He said, "I'm just surrounded by tourists."
Yeah, and that was 5 years ago, that video.
Yeah,
and how long? And then you've got to put into aspect the introduction of capitalism from the owners from most clubs is the fact that has been a changing process for the last, as we're here now, the last 15 years, probably even before that, because we're looking at the fact that the Premier League was brought into fruition to be able to generate more money in that aspect and extended into 20 teams and more TV rights and more money. I mean, I'm not comparing them as the sole entity, but it's the same course of action as taking the capitalism from point A to now we're at Z, and now we're that there's not a chance in hell that any one fan, unfortunately, as much as we love to shout and scream in the stands at the players to motivate them or to give them stick at some stages, but we can't do that to the owners who are behind so thick glass they won't be able to hear a whisper from any single person in any club. The only thing that they can hear is a bit like the Asda. Is it the Asda or Tesco advert of the change in the back pocket? That's all they can hear.
Just to lighten the mood for a sec, I'm just going to bring this graphic up. This was Leeds United's website advertising their fixture list. This is live from their website.
I think that one was that one not Photoshop, but then they actually posted it on Twitter afterwards.
It's on the official site, yeah. Merseyside Reds. They played Merseyside Reds on the 19th of April, Trafford Reds on the 25th, Brighton they're playing on the 1st of May, and London Whites on the 8th of May.
But we all know that, right? If Leeds were the Leeds of 20 years ago when they were at the top of the league,
be all over it. They'd be all over it,
selling
wouldn't they?
their arse as well. So it's like that's why I keep coming back to the point. It's quite they're quite happy to do all this and get the fans on side and capitalise on the fans' views. But if they were up there, they'd be doing the exact same.
Exactly. I mean, it's so counterintuitive because what's stopping this? No one's given any kind of fruition to understand of how big this can go, and what's stopping the clubs that do go to, say, for example, the top 6 are removed, and then we go to a domestic league again, or it's revamped or anything else like that. What's stopping them clubs that are currently making the statements and are fully against it because they're not involved? And I'm not commending that the fact anyone should be involved without actually being qualified for something because they've earned it. But what is stopping the kind of mentality of them owners when they see the big pot of money? Everyone's got a price, unfortunately.
Well,
this is here and say that we will be by the club. We will be, but unfortunately, we have a price to go to a game. And as the bloke that you mentioned earlier from Liverpool, I mean, tickets were £77 then for some areas, and he mentioned £100 for a hospitality. No, hospitality for me isn't even football. You're not with the fans. You're not engaging with the community. You're not expressing your voice across a pitch. Whereas if you're in hospitality, you are closed off, and that is where it goes cold. And
this goes back to the origins of the Premier League, doesn't it? It goes back to the mid-1980s or whenever it was. Tim, you might know better than me. Well, no. When the Premier League was. I'm going back before that. So the changes in the FA statutes, which said that football clubs could actually be run as profit-making entities, because before that time, you actually couldn't run a football club as a profit-making entity. That was against the sort of. It was
when they were allowed to split. When you were allowed to split the football club away from its assets. Yeah. That was the first time. Spurs. It was Irving Scholar who started it all off.
Yeah, and we keep saying, well, what can we do about this? What can we do about this? You can't stop this. You can't stop this. And this has been inevitable since that point. And, a certain part of me is like, Sean said it before, Sky, Premier League, that unless we actually get to some kind of situation where there is actually controls on use or limits on using football. People say, well, football's a business, but actually until the relatively recent past, it wasn't a business like any other. That's the relatively recent past when we're talking about Spurs and Irving Scholar and floating on the stock market and separating your businesses. And this wouldn't happen. Now, that might sound idealistic, but unless you have some idealism within the governance of football, we're just going to sit around in podcasts like this saying how hopeless it is and saying how every club would try and make money. So that's the bottom line, isn't it? We need better governance in football.
There's going to be parallels. We fought a long time to get our club back, and we were very fortunate in the end that we had a Latvian minority shareholder who they stabbed in the back, and he was able to take them to court and effectively got a judgment that was then enforced and removed them, because a lot of us were facing a very difficult situation where we were genuinely concerned we'd never get back to watch our football club.
Yeah,
and I think the fans of the Big Six, as they're called, are going to have this dilemma, aren't they? They're going to have this dilemma. What do I do? Do I carry on supporting this franchise that's lost all connection with the team that I grew up supporting, or do you? I mean, we had discussions about whether we formed a new club, whether we took over a local non-league side and helped build them into a replica of what BFC was to us. And I think obviously Man United have already been through that to a degree after the Glazers took over with FC United, and it hasn't completely failed, but it's sort of plateaued. But I think because I believe this will go through, even if it means them being expelled from the leagues, that you're going to have these discussions. Because Liverpool's, it's arguably already has. It's ceased being what what it originally was to most of the local fans. Most of them can't afford to go in. Those, and they're ripping you off left, right, and centre. And at some point, maybe we do need this reset where you say, well, actually, we're going to create a community club in Liverpool that will get 50,000 people every single week, and it'll be back where it'll be people who go in who actually live in Liverpool or the outer areas, not all these plastic fans and tourists that are populating your stands at the moment.
Well, in all fairness, that's why many Liverpool fans, especially in the local area, got behind Marine when they were behind going against Spurs in the FA Cup, and I think that's exactly the same aspect. I actually agree with pretty much everyone's moral standpoint, especially is yes, take the chance, go and make that cycle to be able to either first of all back something that you actually care about. Because otherwise, if you don't care about a club in football, then why are you supporting them, for one? If you don't care about it, you've got no emotional investment. Or, in some aspects, if many people who are fans across the UK are fans because their dad was a fan or their granddad was a fan, they're not fans because they go to them every week. There's many United fans, Liverpool fans in general, that I know that do not go to the games, have not been to a game, but would still validly have their opinion on this, yet never been stood inside Anfield or Old Trafford. Now, if you've got the aspect of being able to support a local team and the footballing pyramid as a whole, given the fact it's struggling as it is, we're losing clubs left, right and centre, people are losing their jobs. Arsenal furloughed their own mascot, but are happy to go and play, be able to play in a pay-or-play league that they have no right being there in general, other than their history. It doesn't make sense. If you're a moral fan of football in general, I think you can give yourself the credit to detach yourself from something that is no longer have feelings and has no longer attachment to you.
Do you think there'd be an appetite for that, Wes, amongst the Liverpool supporter base? If you look at this comment from Josh, that you'll have to start in the 10th tier, though. But what a journey that'd be, wouldn't it?
Exactly. That's absolutely. We're here for the journey. Everyone's here for the journey. That's what football is. That's what relegation and promotion is.
Yeah.
I don't care where I start. We'd still have 10,000 fans possible, if possible. Not even at our ground, stood around. No one cares. They're there to watch the team. They're there to watch.
I went to FC United a couple of times. During the wilderness years, and it is quite cathartic actually to go to to go somewhere where you because we weren't valued. The Oystons, we were just we were just collateral as far as they were concerned. It was all about Owen and him being Blackpool's #1 fan. And he didn't give a stuff that there was. He didn't give a stuff there was only 700 in there. He wasn't bothered. But you go somewhere like FC United, and they had some flaws in the system. I think particularly the payment structure meant that they really plateaued in the leagues because every player had to be paid the same. It's quite almost like a sort of communist style setup in that everybody was equal. Anybody could take a go. Everybody could take a go at doing the tannoy. Just put your name down and do it. But they had some fantastic ideas. The way they approached the setup of the bars was fantastic because it was all fan led, and it was a very, very interesting experiment. And when you go and see something like that, you can see how it brings the community. You get back to that sort of community focus that I think has been completely lost in the Premier League. It hasn't been completely lost further down the pyramid. Obviously, Dean we had on before from Rochdale. Ourselves at Blackpool, we're working with the community. I know, to be fair, Liverpool, I know the Spirit of Shankly do some great stuff with the community as well. But, us and the owners are very, very much still at Blackpool working on the same page. And you've got owners now, like we used to have, that are on the same page as you. And that's going to be there's going to be a lot of soul searching, I think, in the coming weeks and coming months from any fan of one of these 6 clubs.
Majority of the teams within that top 6 or big 6 bracket, I can't stand saying either, but it is the aspect of none of them have the same related views. There's no unity. There's no unity within them. Take Leicester, for example. Outside of that, they've built something that is tremendous again, off the back of a miracle, don't get me wrong, but you still got to capitalise on that. They've lost their owner. They have a brilliant owner. They've invested well. They've used the tools at their availability. They've invested that in new training facilities, and they're sat in Champions League places because they've worked themselves up. And now we're sat here, and a lot of people are back them. You don't see many people that are Leicester fans outside of that, do you?
No, but look at West Ham as well. I mean, we're not the biggest fan of West Ham's because their fans behave in the playoff final. So imagine, obviously they've won fuck all, haven't they? They've done nothing over the past 30 years, and they finally make it into the top four. Right? They may or may not. But imagine if they're saying right now, sorry, pulled up the drawbridge, get back down to where you were.
They've got as much right to it as Spurs probably have, to be quite honest. But I think with you're looking at over history, I think the one thing that you can't underestimate is you can't mess with Liverpool and the culture and the solidarity in that city. That is a place where I truly believe that if they would set up a Phoenix club, they would sell out any stadium, because that's just the way that city is. And I think you look at Man City, they've got Main Road playing in the lower leagues. They could go there. Ultimately, I think that it's just like you say, it's a different entity completely. And if as soon as that happens in the local communities like Liverpool, like Manchester, these are big cities and these are quite historic cities that still stand by their values that they've had throughout time. And I just think that you're underestimating them entirely. These people thinking that they wouldn't be able to make it up the pyramid themselves in a decade. Say they started in the 10th tier, 10 years time, they're then in the top division of English football, while this European Super League's going on like glorified friendlies. It just seems there's no long-term vision, because ultimately these owners don't care about the long-term vision, because they'll be gone in 10, 15 years because they'll have made the money and they'll piss off. So that's where the divide is. Obviously, this isn't a club decision. It's an owner's decision, because he's only there. He's a temporary custodian, and he's taking that club as a temporary custodian, making all that money, and then buggering off, and then going, well, as soon as it starts to fall apart, they'll all leg it. As soon as the European Super League starts to fall apart, they'll
I heard a comment from a Scouser on the Monday Night show. I don't know, it might have been 606, and he said the power of the people is greater than the people in power. And I think that ties in from what you've just said, Sean. This was from a Scouser, and he was relating that to the supporters of Liverpool. And you'd like to think that if the push did come to the shove, that they'd turn their back on it and they'd go off and do their own thing. And that's the only way out I can see, unless there's some legal way out of this.
Yeah, gridlock the stadiums. You can do all sorts. We talked about this.
I've got the perfect solution. You can set up a people's club, and then you can play at Goodison when Everton go to the stadium at the Dock. That's sorted. That's fixed. Done. But
it's Liverpool's original home as well.
Is it?
Other way around. Other way around.
The other way around.
Everton had Anfield first, and then they upped it, and Liverpool took over.
I agree with you. I agree with your statement there. Definitely, like you would have the aspect of having them clubs around. As Sean said, I mean, there's many capacity clubs within the UK. I mean, for example, we look at Newcastle's related takeover not too long ago. That was stopped through unholy reasons due to the Premier League. But if they were in a situation, they are not in a greatest situation anyway, but they're still at the top and peak of Premier League aspect. They have a massive fan control. That would, if something was as drastic as they were in this situation, I think the aspects of Wolverhampton, Newcastle, Leeds, Liverpool, and Manchester have that kind of city unity across their particular clubs. And if they were to be threatened to an emotional detachment franchise that is actually worth nothing to them in any way, shape, or form, other than for the top dogs to make money, then I don't respect any fan that stays there in any way, shape. I don't. Because you guys wouldn't, and you support your club every day, going to them because you actually go to the games.
I made a joke on Twitter that, not that, I wasn't particularly active. I just didn't go to games and wandered around, compared to, particularly Tim, the commitment that people put into the battle, but I made a joke on Twitter that we could offer workshops, for about £50 an hour to all these supporters groups about how to cope with it.
how to protest, how to boycott.
Well, I was joking to my mate who's a Liverpool fan at work, and I was saying, well, I should offer you counselling on when you reach that point where you can no longer you can no longer reconcile what your club is doing or what the owners of your club are doing with your desire to support them. This is what it feels like. And it was quite odd because we are one of the few sets of fans who've gone through that.
I'd say we're the only set of fans that have done it. We're the only set of fans in this country that has done it.
Yeah, I mean, we took it to the nth degree, whereas, I mean, we wouldn't buy our away tickets from the ground because Blackpool got 50p commission. We wouldn't buy anything off anybody who was a sponsor at Blackpool, and effectively, that as a result, Blackpool lost all its sponsors.
Do you remember when the
shirts, didn't you?
Yeah, we had that.
Wasn't that done by
like 6 stars? It was done by Lee, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was Lee's idea, and then BST. Yeah, Lee Morton. Yeah,
and
then BST ran with it, and we ended up outselling the proper shirts probably about 10-1, and it actually became almost like a figure of ridicule to wear the Blackpool home shirt because they became known as mushrooms, and
it still is now, isn't it?
And we had this striped shirt that this pinstripe shirt that just was reviled by most of the fan base, just simply because you were buying off it was obvious you were buying off the club, and it was a very very strange time when you look back at it now compared with the situation we have. But we basically stood toe to toe for the owners for 4 years, and I think Liverpool, Man United, and the 3 London clubs. And City are all going to have to do this. They're going to have to battle for the soul of the clubs, and I think I'd like to think that the rest of English football will get behind them as well. But I just have a horrible feeling whatever we do, whatever happens, this is going through.
Yeah, I think it's even though just with the announcement alone, it has already started, because as soon as that announcement came up and the sole goal of what this was going to go with and what it can expand to, you've already just washed away everything that club stands for in most areas. It doesn't stand for the people, doesn't stand for the fans that go there. It only stands for the fact that you want to do commercial revenue elsewhere across the world. It doesn't take into consideration the staff. It doesn't take into consideration the livelihoods and the history of what their dads, granddads, grandmothers have been through watching in that club. And essentially, with this statement, especially as you've mentioned, with legacy fans, you are not you're not appropriate anymore.
You're a legacy.
Have to stand and be
fucking legacy fan.
You have to be sit there and take a leaf out of your book, and it may not be 4 years. It may be longer, or you turn your back on that aspect and take a moral standpoint.
It's as long as it takes, isn't it? As long as it takes.
I'll tell you what, if you want to fund, this, just get some T-shirts with legacy fan in different colours. They would fly out, wouldn't they? If you want to fund this campaign, I'm logging off now. I'm making them.
The new PPE.
Yeah.
Right, we've not really followed any of the notes, Tim, have we?
It's just covered most of it as we've gone through it.
Good points, wasn't it, at the end? I mean, for me, what that thing at the end about good points, the key possible good point from this ties into everything we've talked about is, and it's not probably good for Wes and his club, but if we do lose the 6, then we're going to see the Premier League TV rights deflated. If the Premier League TV rights are deflated, then one of the core problems of English football at the moment is it's beyond the cost of English people. We've seen, even at our level, we've seen Wigan having to cast far and wide to get an owner. We've seen, Bolton go through all sorts of ownership travails. We've seen clubs on markets for months and months and months, years at a time, because nobody wants to touch the game. At the top level, you know, you've seen Newcastle priced to a point where there's only a state can basically buy them. And if we can devalue football, then you are more likely to, A, if it's your bag, make fan ownership a financial prospect, and B, even if fan ownership's not your bag, to have sort of a more of a traditional custodian, such as we have been incredibly lucky to get, as in a bloke or a woman or whatever, that actually has a connection with the club, who actually supports and follows the club. You know, and what this brings home is how incredibly lucky we are to have him, because you know, it just talking to Wes makes you realise that these psychopaths that run the clubs that at the top level have literally no connection. And that's not by accident. It's because the people who have got connection, there is nobody in Newcastle can afford Newcastle. You're not telling me that between the people in Newcastle, there's not somebody there who would like to own Newcastle, but nobody can afford it because the game has priced itself to a point where effectively it can only be run by these sort of sociopathic, you know, huge capitalists on a scale beyond
capitalist pigs.
Comprehend. Yeah, we can't comprehend how they've made their money because it's just off the scale. They're not Jack Walker or whoever who actually followed Blackburn and made a bit of money in the town and wanted to give back. They're not Dave Whelan. They are a different level of people. And I'm not romanticising Dave Whelan and Jack Walker and whoever and, you know, the old days. But that's my one bit of hope, is that if you deflate English football, then you might actually have some custodianship of it, because people who want to be custodians might be able to afford to buy the way into the game.
It depends how immediate that impact is, though, because that would have to be watered through so much because of the spending that goes on, the current structures of most clubs that actually don't make profit as it is. And if you're deflating the money from the top that trickles down, then if anything, the process for majority of clubs who are already in debt will take longer and longer and longer. And unfortunately, it becomes a painstaking situation for every club within the 4 tiers or below. And unless there is the investment in the clubs that are, whether it is Championship or whether it's Premier League in the new state that it could be, unless there is investment there and that maintains that, but without the marketing structure of the top six or big six, etc., it could be a very difficult scenario for many fans, staff, players alike, to be honest.
We're all just smirking at this comment. I bet none of these US businessmen has ever broke their leg in a cup final like Dave Whelan.
He nearly killed me once.
Dave Whelan broke the leg. What do you mean?
I was once, right, because I lived in Wigan for part of my youth, and I was once riding my bike, had my lights on and everything like a good cyclist, and a Bentley went past me about 90 miles an hour, and I had to dive off into a hedge. And when I got up, it was Whelan's Bentley, and he was on his way to. He used to own a place called Wrightington Country Club, which is just near one of the Wigan junctions. So I've never held truck with Dave Whelan.
It sounds like
I might not have been here. Had he been about a yard to the right, he'd have got me.
Sounds like a scene from a Frank Spencer movie. Were you shaking your fist at him as you were?
Really was, yeah. Really was.
Where do we go from here then? Where does the game go from here? So let's say it happens. What then?
Well, that's where the courts are going to play a big role in this. And I think also, I think the Germans will stay out of it because of the rule of 51. I just don't see their fans carrying this over the line for either of Bayern or Dortmund to go and join.
I'll probably go over to Dortmund, stay there for a bit, to be honest.
I think I went quite a bit during the boycott years.
When I was there, to be honest, as much as I'm kind of being a hypocrite in the aspect of people going to clubs outside of the domestic league and going to understand what that culture is like. But I was there for that aspect. And it does just seem more unified, and and that you just get that by walking in the stadium. You might not even know about the 50+1. You just understand the fact that they're valued. It's a very strange experience, and of course, to understand that they're maintaining that. I mean, as Sean said at the beginning of all of this, I'm very surprised at PSG's standpoint in this. I'm very surprised at that. But I mean, I'm happily surprised that they're taking that kind of moral high ground. And again, with Germany, I hope that is the case.
Maybe they're just playing hard to get.
Well, possibly. I think it's because they're so close to a Champions League. They're like, we don't want to piss anyone off right now. Let's just try and obtain this, and then we'll join you guys later. Does that sound all right? Yeah.
Well, City were the last English club to go in, weren't they, as well? Which I wonder if that was for similar reasons. Because I thought City would have been all in with it, but they were actually the last ones and the most reluctant, apparently, because they're in the semis, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, again, going back to the other news, I don't want to make this too much top tier orientated, but I mean, the sacking of Jose Mourinho. I mean, the rumor of obviously that being something to do with the Super League, but again, reports are coming out saying that isn't the case. I would like to say that is a cover up. I don't think I posted a tweet earlier today that was. So you've got a guy in to solely win you silverware due to his pedigree and his international experience of winning titles. You've got to the final of your very first trophy beside the Champions League in domestic football for quite some time. You've got not the best chance of winning. It's not been plain sailing, but then you sack him 6 days before. So well done. Most Spurs sounding thing I could ever hear, I think.
For what I heard, I think the two clubs are leading this. And if we go back to the big picture, was it that there was the bit that they were mentioning beforehand, where United and Liverpool were threatening to leave the EPL and join the EFL. It's that these are the two clubs leading it, aren't they? The two American-owned franchise fans. They are
I shouldn't
definitely
drinking this beer, really. American Pale Ale.
You have to boycott it, John. Not an IPA.
I'll balance it out with some Rheinbacher, some nice 50+1 lager. Sorry, Tim. Anyway, sorry.
No, literally, I think United and Liverpool are very much the protagonists here. I get the impression that some of the other clubs have perhaps come in on the coattails because they don't want to be left behind. Because it's like even in Italy, you look at AC's going in it, but Inter aren't, and you've got Roma and all these other great clubs and
Lazio, Fiorentina.
I mean, we can't act like we're surprised in regards to that, though. Like, it would be naive of us to think that we've invited the richest guys in and understand that they've built a brand, they've got us here, they've brought us success, and now they're going to try and cash in. I mean, in a business sense of view, if this wasn't a football club where people actually gave a shit, and the fans that were suffering and we're the assets and so were the players and the staff, etc., and this was a well-oiled business, you'd be doing the same thing.
Yeah. They say football is a business
not
like
in the
no
same
other.
manner, and I'm not trying to justify it in any way, shape, or form, but that's unfortunately how they view it. Because
from a purely business,
disconnected.
From a pure business point of view, right?
Never mind football.
Yeah.
It's also from their standpoint is that football is a game with regulation and rules, and there's a you can see in you can see in
it won't be a patch on the Anglo-Italian Cup. Nice one, Phil.
You can see him saying, well, can we do this? Oh, no, it's against the regulations. You can just see the thinking of, okay, well, let's make our own. Well, why don't we make our own rules? Let's make our own competition. These are not people that are used to playing by regulations, are they? They're used to people that are essentially used to crushing the competition, buying out the competition, and dominating. So
you've nailed it on the head. Yeah, they've nailed it on the head. They've decided you're taking too much money out of our pockets that we probably think we can make more of. So let's get rid of that. No risks to any of the clubs in question. Just invite the world in, let them spend their money, we'll take it. Bob's your uncle, Fanny's your aunt, we're out.
And you fans are the collateral damage, aren't you? The fans of those teams are the collateral damage.
So are the players, so are the staff.
Well, they are, but isn't it interesting that you were saying, and whether serious or whether in jest, I don't know. You were saying, I fancy going to Dortmund now. And doesn't that show something here that I think this is really interesting? You know, we can be as idealistic as we like, but essentially we live in a market society. And what we've got on the plate is going to be basically plastic football. And isn't it really interesting how popular German football is and how a lot of people idealize German football? Isn't it really interesting how, like, possibly we're going to see plastic football versus genuine football? If these six clubs go, the best possible thing the Premier League, the Football League, the rest of the English League could do is start to get its head around how to market itself as a genuine product, you know, as atmosphere. I don't buy this thing that kids today only want to watch players and they only see it as a computer game and so on. I don't entirely buy that. If you look at the North Stand at Blackpool, it's full of, you know, not little kids, but it's full of people, 16, 17, 18, 19. My lad doesn't care about football on the telly. He loves going to the game because it's buzzing, because it's loud, because people swear, because it's got something you don't get in the rest of the world. Because they have the
realistic aspect, though, of their family members taking them. You're not considering anyone else outside of the aspects of not having either a footballing major family or them being based outside of a local club.
Well, that also comes back to the fact that the Premier League clubs have deliberately priced kids out of there. The average age of the Stretford end in 1989 was, I think, it was certainly under 16. It was 15 and there were lots of kids used to go to football on their own. You didn't need to be taken. You'd go on your own because it was, you know, £3 or £4 to get in. Now you can't. The game it's priced itself
too
out.
Expensive,
yeah, absolutely. And if English football wanted to fight against this genuinely, to put up a fight and to survive against this, if it could look at the German model, which we sort of fetishize to a certain extent, it's kind of you know, it's
Tim does.
Well, it's a joke, isn't it? I don't mean it's a kind of like, it's the football hipster thing to do, isn't it? To love German football, and it's brilliant. I'd love to go. I've never had the chance, but if the big money's gone, well, we've got to do something. And what else are we going to do other than try and create an actual culture and get people in? And again, I'm not trying to wind up a Liverpool fan, but you've got Liverpool who've got the least number of supporters within their own postcode of any Premier League club. I think I'm right in saying. And just down the road, you've got Everton that have the highest number of supporters from within their own postcode. You know, there isn't just one way to run these clubs. Everton, I think I'm also right in saying, have got the youngest set of supporters in the Premier League. And I think I'm right in saying that Liverpool have either got the oldest or second oldest set of supporters within the Premier League, or season ticket holders within the Premier League. The season ticket model, that's why kids don't go, because you've got to have a bloody season ticket to get in the Premier League, you know? I've got a mate who lives in Liverpool.
Pocket money, that is a lot of washes of dishes, I'll tell you.
Yeah. And there's a lot of simple things we could do instead of going, oh, the TV money. There's a lot of simple things we could do in the long to medium term instead of decrying what the billionaires do. And I agree that I'm probably being idealistic, but the game ain't dead. People keep saying the game's gone. It's not. It hasn't gone. The game's there for us to take.
Yeah,
you only have to look.
Fans of the top six.
You have to look further down the league, don't you? To see, it's not dead. It's not dead in Division 1. It's not dead in Division 2, and after in the Championship, I think, you know, that we spoke about the reset. That's what we need, and I think Liverpool fans and Man United fans and City fans will all actually enjoy it more if they're actually going to watch the teams that their dads watched 30, 40 years ago, where they're actually there stood with the mates and having a beer with the mates and not being sold some fancy food and £10 drinks and all the crap that comes with it.
It goes back to it being a working man's club, which it's not been for 15, 20 years. Because one moment that did hit me, and I know this is going to sound strange, but I was just in one of the Liverpool shops getting a top, and I remember coming up to the section, of course, where you complete the purchase, and I saw branded water. And I was at the point where I was there like, how branded water and branded chocolate for a football club. It makes absolutely no sense in any way, shape, or form, other than the aspect of people trying to line their pockets higher and higher.
Coconut water supplier.
Yeah, I know.
Awkward dairy milk in the Blackpool.
I was going to say the dairy milk's in the Blackpool shop. I saw it.
£4 for a dairy milk with Blackpool FC written on it.
I said to my lad, we were in the club shop and went, I thought I'd shut him up, get some chocolate. He went, Dad, it's a rip-off. I don't want that.
I think it comes back down to it. The minute that the TV money, everyone obviously there's this obsession with having to compete for TV money and having to secure that in order to make your club sufficient on its own. And the minute that goes away, when it comes to the fact that the big teams are going away, then you're forced into self-sufficiency. There's no ifs, no buts about it. We talk about the idealism of every club being self-sufficient, but ultimately, if you're not self-sufficient after this, say this happens, then you go and bust. You look at like West Ham under their ownership, and then they lose this big chunk of money. If they're not self-sufficient, they go bust. The owner will probably just throw the club to the wayside the minute that the money goes away. But then the next custodians are going to be forced to make these small, like Matt was saying, it's these small little things that you can do. There's so many little things on a local level you can do to create revenue for the club. And that's all about having to be forced to do it. Ultimately, all owners won't do it unless they're forced to do it. But it'll almost create an environment where they have to do that. Otherwise, the club's not going to succeed. And that's where the game will be infinitely better, in my eyes, if this goes through and this happens for the vast majority of clubs in the country, because their clubs are going to be forced to look in-house, restructure everything and go, how are we going to make this club work now in the longer term? And it's going to be the fans that actually go to the games that are going to be the prime market for that, or the fans that are watching on iFollow or what have you. Ultimately, I think it'll be a case that if this does happen, I think the Premier League and the EFL potentially would merge into one sort of divisional structure again. But yeah, it's just about those local solutions but it's a case of you're forced into it. You have to be forced into it to do it, and this will force that through.
And with such a great owner as Simon Sadler, we've probably got a good chance of winning it. So bring it on. Bring it on. Good old Super League, good old Americans. Oh, joking, but joking aside, Blackpool would be quite well placed in this day after the day of reckoning. We've got such a good owner.
Well, you've already laid the blueprint out essentially for most to follow, and unfortunately, I just feel like the optimistic view of that being the place and a lot of them being forced into that aspect is just we're not considering the fact that majority of them clubs that are still up in the Premier League still have multi-million-pound, billion-pound owners. They're just not putting the money into the club. It doesn't necessarily mean that the fact that they'll be forced out in any way, shape, or form to be custodians.
But what's there for them? If there's no Champions League, if there's no £150 million prize at the end of it, if all that's devalued, what is there for those?
It's that dream, isn't it? It's that big dream
for someone who it depends what that asset is then worth. But whoever is going to be able to afford that asset, as say Leicester, Newcastle, etc., is still going to be someone that is a multi-millionaire, not necessarily anyone that's affiliated with the club. You're just giving it someone who's got a little bit less money with the same idea set. Unfortunately, unless it is with for example, a fan-owned society that have then put the money together to then participate that into the club and to achieve the club as a whole, then you're in a great position to go ahead. And you guys, as you rightly said, I've got ridiculously lucky, but not in any way, shape, or form, because you probably made that luck for fighting so long. So the step in the right direction would probably be, yeah, they get sold off once the money's not there, but it depends on whether the outside viewers that are the target audience for the Super League, do they see emotional investment as something that they could be interested in? Because I'd rather be emotionally invested in Burnley than interested in a soulless Liverpool.
I don't know about that one. That's probably too far, to be honest.
We've already nearly got a tangerine shirt. Come on, you might as well just come over.
Okay, we're at 10 to 11 now, so let's just go around the room before we could be here all night, couldn't we, talking? So let's go around the room individually and let's give our opinions and of where you think this is going to go and where you want it to go. So, Tim, let's start with you.
Yeah, well, I think there's a commitment here from these 12 to do what they're going to do, come what may, and those that they persuade to go with them. So I think it is going to happen. I think we're going to end up with a lot of litigation. Somebody asked before where that might be. It's the competition courts, effectively. Competition law will ultimately dictate whether sanctions can be applied. I think government's got to step in, and I think.
What can the government do, Tim?
The government can legislate on it and
regulate the industry, regulate the water and the utilities and the
and effectively say, in order to how they would go about doing it, I don't think they have probably even thought themselves. But I was quite impressed with Oliver Dowden this afternoon, actually, when I heard him speak, and I think there's a massive the swell of opinion against what these people are trying to do to our heritage. At the end of the day, it's part of the English heritage. It's part of every European and never mind European. It's the world heritage, and they're trying to rip it away from us for monetary gain. So I think they're going to go, and I'd like to think that the UEFA and the national organisations are going to stand toe to toe and kick them all out. Now that's obviously not going to help Wes and people who support teams like that, but I generally think that's what they've got to do. They've got to say, no, you're not doing this, because you can't have these teams. They're going to have like about 3 or 4 times the amount of money as anybody else in the divisions. The divisions aren't going to be competitive anyway with them in, because at the moment they get about £100 million if they win the Premier League. They're going to be guaranteed £350 million a season just from this competition. Never mind what they get elsewhere. I mean, it's just going to completely distort the game. So they've got to go.
Even more so, yeah.
Well, yeah, more than it is already. But they've got to. For me, and I don't say this lightly. They've got to go, and they've got to be kicked out of every single league. I've got to stand so kick them out, and kick them out sooner rather than later, and say we're not having it, and then see what the fans do. Because I tell you what, I know if Liverpool fans. That they won't take it lightly.
Someone put in the comments they'll burn the ground down, and it's not beyond the realms of possibilities. It's massive civil unrest.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge.
The
game's never going to be the same after this.
Bed, shall I?
Say again, mate. Sorry.
I'll just get the C4s that I've got stashed out there. Just get them straight to Anfield, shall I?
Right, Matt. Over to you. What do you think is going to happen, and where do you think this is all going to end up, and where do you want to? Where do you want to see it going?
Well, Tim nicked what I was going to say when he made the point about the money. I just made a note and he nicked me last point, which was, there is no way that we can sustain. There's no way we can look at our own league and call it competitive or call it sporting if we allow these teams to stay. And if the FA or UEFA don't deal with it, then, the clubs, it's the death of sport if you've got 350 million plus. What else do I want to see? I think most of all, I want to see the veil come off of football, if that makes sense. I think that there's a lot in this proposal that is an extreme view of what happens anyway. I have long held the view that the way the finances are structured in football is essentially a cartel or a cabal, I'm not sure which is the right word, that the big clubs have set it up to keep themselves rich, that the clubs that get the Champions League money then do well domestically, so they do get the domestic prize money, so they get back in the Champions League. Then it's actually quite hard to be unsuccessful. It's almost impossible to imagine. And we're all going, oh, look at Arsenal, they're 9th. They're fucking 9th. That's not a bad season. They're 9th in the top division. And what we're seeing here is an extended version of what already is there. And I think what I would like to see most of all is for all that to just end up going up in smoke, because if the Super League takes the money away from the Premier League, then the Premier League can't be what it has become. And then I think what Sean said, we go back to a position where we might have an overall governing body for the English game. Why the hell we've had two governing bodies for the last 30 years, I will never, ever understand. People can say, oh, it's business. I'll never understand we've had two governing bodies. I've gone on, but I think that's my answer.
Sean, over to you. Where do you think this is all going to end up? Where do you want it to end up? How do you want it to end up?
Well, I want it to end up obviously similar to Matt. They can go and then it could be an absolute car crash, and then we're sort of sat there laughing really in the background, because it's. I always thought that the reset for English football would be IPTV becoming more of a bigger thing, and obviously the first time ever that the TV deal has gone down in value, and I always thought that the Premier League, that was the way it was going to go and that was how it was going to end, and I was sort of biding my time for that to be the case. But then obviously we're looking now, and if this is going to be the way it has to happen, then it has to happen, and it's been needed for a long, long time now, and we're thinking about what could happen off the back of it, and what I would like to happen off the back of it is, as I said before, merging of the EFL and the Premier League into an English football regulator, having an independent regulator, as obviously BST have campaigned for so long, and that enforcement of self-sufficiency. It's. I just feel like there needs to be some sort of ruling where it's that perfect moment, because this is so outlandish what's happened, to be outlandish the opposite way and be really forceful with how you're regulating football and making it a thing perhaps that you can only, when you're self-sufficient, it has to be at the level that you're investing at. That's the only level you can invest back in or take out of a club, or you can only use certain amounts of money for marketing wise. And if you are marketing the league for what it is, obviously you see Sky market the Championship as this like perfect division of like anyone can beat anyone, blah, blah, blah. But if you want to market it, then we need to market it where the core parts of the game are. And that's where I think the difference will be, is where they're forced to look at the proper market of where football originally came and originally started. And the minute that these owners are forced to look in that direction is when football changes forever. And in a perfectly selfish viewpoint, if 6 teams go, then we're going to get automatically promoted to the Championship, and then we're going to be laughing to the bank because we've got one of the best. I think we've got the best owner in the English Football League, and it's going to prove that way in the next 5-10 years. So, as far as I'm concerned, completely selfish view, go ahead, because it's been well overdue.
Wes, over to you. Where do you think this is going to end up for Liverpool? Where do you want it to go?
Honestly, I can take points from each three of you so far, given the fact that, yes, the English Football League would be better with a revamp and making sure that the logistics are in place regulations are in place for them to invest only a certain amount from what they've earned from the previous year, etc., because that would make a sustainable system for majority of clubs. And then, of course, selling assets between them creates the better view. But I think, taking from Tim's point of view, I think the government, if anything we know about them, unfortunately, they like money more than we do. And given the fact that football is such a massive industry for not only the economies, businesses around, but for England as general, because it is supposed to be the best league in the world, that they have got no choice than to put it in this kind of system and to go to a unified league, or at least put in the legislations in place. For Liverpool in particular, if they're willing to go ahead with it, and the owners are to be able to do so, then unfortunately it is dead for anyone who has got an emotional support there, because that isn't what football's about, from no matter what tier you are in. So personally, I would like to see the government get involved heavily and unify with as many bodies as possible to create a governing body, whether it goes ahead or not, because I feel like the opportunity is there to create the statement anyway, because the intent has been there. Again, these were only supposed to be letters of intent, not necessarily the actual full-blown equation, but we've lighted it's indifferent. So I feel like the government and other qualifying bodies need to be able to take this as an opportune moment to be able to regulate the businesses that they are supposed to be, how the businesses are ran, and back to being football clubs.
Right, okay. I think we'll leave it there then. I think we could be here all night, gentlemen. So, Wes, thanks ever so much for coming on. You've been great, and we really hope this gets sorted out. Just for my heart really goes out to all these Liverpool fans, United fans. I mean, they're in a real shit situation, and it's no fault of their own. And as usual, it's the fans that are getting stiffed. Yeah. Right, gents. So, thanks for coming on, everybody. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
We'll be back on the Seasides podcast tomorrow. We've got the massive event of Blackpool versus Rochdale, which is ever so slightly smaller than Liverpool versus Real Madrid.
Not to you guys, it's not.
Very true.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Matt. You've been great great again.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Okay, right. Cheers, Sean. You're not an accredited journalist for nothing. Great points as ever.
Cheers. I'm sure the complete opposite will happen.
Don't make any predictions.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks, everyone in the comments. Thanks for joining us. I'll put the audio podcast for this out tomorrow. And we'll catch you tomorrow. So thanks for joining us, everybody.
Thanks for having me, boys.
Up the pool, up the pool twice, up the Liverpool.
Up the pool.
Up the pools.